Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the tropes and trends of the horror genre. This is episode number 40.
Wow.
40. When you get to this big, it's like when you turn 30, when you turn 40, when you turn 50. These are big numbers,
yes,
people.
Sir.
And 40 is, man, we're not even a year into this and we banged out 40 episodes.
High five.
Yeah. That was high. That was the sound of a high five.
Truly, not truly. One person clapping. That's two people making hand contact.
So tonight we are going to cover the greatest horror films of all time, numbers 30 to 21.
Yeah,
we're getting down into it now. This list is getting
tight,
for real.
So if you
super for real,
if one of your kind of sleeper films hasn't made it onto the list yet,
it ain't gonna make. Yes,
probably.
Yes,
not.
this is the break point. This is for sure, definitively the break point. There are no sleeper films. There's no real oddities. There's nothing weird. There's no shockers in here. We're not gonna throw in Showa. We're not gonna. We already threw the Lost Boys out in the last
Abbott
episode.
Costello meet Frankenstein.
Abbott Costello's not making it. House of a Thousand Corpses isn't making it. We're getting down into the stuff that everybody knows and everybody loves. You may not have seen the film, but you have definitely heard of each of these films.
Right.
No matter what.
Yep.
These have seeped into your subconscious through popular culture, through advertising, through friends and family telling you should see this film. We're definitely down into that list. So that is that list.
Before we, I'd like to before we get completely rolling here, I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out here.
Is this a shout out to Matt Howell?
Well, no. Well, and hey, Matt, how you doing? Because we know you like getting a shout out on the podcast.
This is your shout out. Because Matt did acquire tickets recently. Two tickets to
Paradise.
No, not
two tickets to Paradise.
Matt is a big Eddie Money fan. He got 2 tickets. No, he did not get 2 tickets to Paradise. He got 2 tickets to a cinematic screening of the 1978 John Carpenter classic Halloween alongside PJ Souls, who was in attendance and did a Q&A afterwards.
At the Hollywood Theater. God loves the Hollywood Theater.
At the Hollywood Theater. So for that, I have to give Matt Howell a major shout out.
I would have gone, but
tickets.
I had to surrender my ticket to
our ace researcher
Ernie Campbell. So,
and he had his head buried in his hoodie for a good 75% of the film.
It's a scary movie. But no, the shout out that I was going to make is
real shout outs
to David Day and Bryce Hansen, who have a new horror podcast called Horror Movie Talk.
Yeah,
and where
they talk about
horror movies. Funny that they've got a podcast that's sort of similar to Tremble or the kinds of movie podcasts that talk about one movie and go in depth. They're only 6 deep in right now, and
what are some of the films they've covered so far? How many episodes have you listened to?
I've listened to 2 of them.
Okay.
They did one called Devil at the Door, I think, which is a little, and they didn't like it.
Okay.
They did The Meg. They did.
Were they pro Meg? Were they anti Meg?
They liked them. I think they kind of liked the Meg. They also recently did The Predator. Was the most recent one. They sort of had the same conclusion that I did.
Yeah, big dumb fun.
Yeah, good guys. But anyway, so they I think it's kind of funny now that they looked up to us and said, "Hey, we love your podcast. You guys are the old vets of this." And it's like it's just we're kind of making this up as we go. But it was wonderful to actually to contact them, and that sort of another notion that the horror community in Portland is alive and strong, and we welcome you guys to the kiddie pool.
Yes,
it's nice and fresh as long as Mike doesn't wet himself.
Yes, weird to think. Yeah, no, I'm not wetting myself. Weird to think that 40 podcasts in that you're the veteran of horror podcasting.
Yeah,
when I scroll around, I know there's a number of different people that Scariest Things follows on Instagram, on Facebook, etc. We're talking about we're talking about podcasters, horror podcasters who are into they're like 600 deep.
Yeah.
700 deep.
Yeah.
I feel like 40. We're barely even scratching the surface.
We're babes still at this production, but we're hoping you enjoy it.
Charlatans.
Charlatans aside,
yes.
I would ask all of our listeners to like us on whatever streaming device that you're
on Facebook, on Twitter, on
iTunes,
on Instagram,
SoundCloud.
on iTunes, on SoundCloud.
Yeah, however you want to do it, because the more
Stitcher,
you guys like us, the more
Google Play.
This gets out.
Yep.
And the more it gets out, the more we can provide for you.
Yes, and we love the providing.
Stumping. That's our advertising message for the day.
Stump it.
But in addition to us, I do recommend that you check out David and Bryce on Horror Movie Talk.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's get right into the top 100 horror films of all time, numbers 30 to 21.
Zombievers.
Zombievers. Thank God we're finally talking about Zombievers, because it deserves to be on the top 100.
No.
You know, if I did, in all seriousness, if I did 150.
Would you put Zombievers in the 150 slots?
Top 150? I think I'd put Zombievers
in. No.
150?
No.
Oh, that's it. It's on. It's on. We're going to do a top 150, and Zombievers, you'll be surprised. Zombievers will be higher than you think it should be.
And it'll probably watch House of the Devil still not make the list.
But that zombie
running joke.
Man, those guys they're smart guys.
All right. So in all seriousness,
yes.
Let's get to it. Number 30.
Number 30 is the 2014 film It Follows.
Yes, this is a David Robert Mitchell film. And this is sort of a retro, a current golden age. I think we say this is the golden age movie that has an 80s vibe to it.
Right.
Very strong 80s vibe to it, where sex is deadly, and it's potentially, and it sort of goes back to some of the old AIDS scares, or the it's kind of the wink in the direction of the Friday the 13th things, where you're
don't have sex, you will be killed.
That's right, and that you just can't stop this thing that's coming after you. It's just
I think that's the brilliance of this film, is there's so many different ways you can take that equation in this film. I mean, it could be like the girl is the oppressor, the girl is the victim, sex is good and powerful, sex is bad and shameful.
Right.
Society has the wrong approach, society has the right approach. I mean, there's so many different, that's the thing that is so incredibly clever and smart about this film, is that you can pull this film apart in so many different ways, and it takes on so many different meanings. The other thing I think is really great about this film is, you were kind of talking about the fact that it's got this great sort of retro look. I look at this as, and we talked about this in the last podcast, about sort of what are the sort of seminal transitional moments in, a specific genre or a specific era of horror films. And I would argue this is almost one of them, because this was so genre breaking and genre defying, that I would say, as we're kind of getting into this contemporary golden age of horror, I would say this is one of the big markers, and it's such an interesting film.
Yeah, I think that the quandary that it puts our protagonists into is, because what you do to try and shed this curse of this shadowy, slow-moving stalker,
right?
That will transfer bodies and become and will not stop, whatever, is to pass it along to somebody else. But once they get killed, it comes back to you, and so to extend the chain, you try and tell somebody to go and proliferate as much as possible. So on the other hand, it's like, have as much sex as you possibly can,
right,
so that you can spread, so that you get as much distance from this thing. And this
is all shot in Detroit.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Detroit. I think Detroit is a popular place. I think there's a Don't Breathe. I think similar kind of a thing.
Yep.
Which haven't seen on the list yet.
We might be getting there.
Might get it.
Maybe not.
We don't know. But
stay tuned. Keep listening.
I think that would be a close cousin kind of a feel in a sense of the certainly.
Although, this the color palette that they chose for this, everything is kind of this like it's sort of this like grayish blue color. Everything is sort of dark. Everything is kind of hazy. It's kind of
dreamy.
Yes, that was exactly the word I was going to use. Takes on a very dreamlike quality. Really interesting cinematography. Really interesting choices.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that our protagonists in the end decide to fight back and find a way around this rather than because I think the you go through these stages of how do you handle the threat, and then one of the ideas was, God, I just got to find someone and hook up so that it gets away, that it'll take them out. But then it's like at that point it's like, but then it's just going to come. It's just going to mow through that line. So let's go deal with this. I
wasn't keen. I remember when I watched it. I've only seen it the one time. I wasn't keen about the ending. The ending to me, that in the pool, I get what they were going, and I understand like metaphorically what they were trying to do with that. But to me, I don't know. It didn't quite catch me. Everything else in the film, I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, I think that if they had taken a non-physical way of trying to deal with this.
Right.
The root of this stalker, and how this, what is it? It doesn't. There's not a whole lot of exposition of what there's a lot of they philosophize on what it might be,
which is why it's so brilliant.
Yeah. So
the fact that there's not a lot of exposition, young filmmakers, take note. You don't need a big exposition dump. You don't need lots of ham-fisted exposition. You can get away with interesting visuals to tell that story.
In a lot of ways, this is, I think, when we talk about how retro it feels kind of like Halloween.
It does. I mean, Halloween has what Halloween has, which we may talk about Halloween at some point. I'm kidding. We will be talking about Halloween. Spoiler alert. Halloween is coming up. It's a realism, it's a legitimacy, it's an authenticity, right? Like everything in that film has a realistic quality where you can actually put yourself into that film.
Yep.
And this one, I would argue, even though there's definitely some kind of like supernatural qualities happening in the film, you definitely feel like you could be in this film, or you might have been in these kinds of situations.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of being in these kinds of situations and body transfer,
one of our favorite movies to talk about is coming up next. This
my God!
Number 29, 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
So good on so many different levels.
Yeah, this is
great soundtrack, great actors, great cinematography,
and
great special effects.
And this is, I think, when people sometimes say, and I know this is coming up from one of your all-time favorites with the new Suspiria movie coming out. It's like, oh God, please don't redo the movie. Sometimes not a bad thing.
Oh yeah, no.
And we're going to hit a couple of them today.
Dawn of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead is a perfect example of why you should redo that film.
Yep. This is, and what didn't diminish the previous film?
No, not at all.
The 78 Body Snatchers does not diminish the 56 Body Snatchers, which was more of the Red Scare, explicitly Red Scare kind of don't trust your neighbors. What are they doing? They're up to something.
Right.
The 78 Body Snatchers I think it's more post Watergate.
It's because it's pre-AIDS, right? So it's not a direct allegory for.
But this was an era, in just coming out of Vietnam,
right?
And sort of the demoralized nature of the country at the time, right. And again, I think, hey, this is the perfect time to do another Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Right.
Find yourself some really good actors who can pitch it, because it's.
Great actors: Leonard Nimoy, Donald Sutherland, Jeff Goldblum,
Veronica Cartwright, Brooke Adams.
Brooke Adams is great. Although she's not along for the whole ride.
Right. this is a, I think a thriller wrapped in science fiction and horror trappings.
Yep.
It has. I think they shifted from this is in the San Francisco setting is fantastic.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And speaking of we were just talking about with It Follows, like the authenticity of it. Like it's all of the scenes make sense. All of the scenes look authentic. All of the acting is authentic. All of the responses people have to each other is authentic. Right. I mean, I love. There's a scene at the beginning of the film where Brooke Adams is talking to her husband, who's a physician. He's watching a Warriors game. He's not paying attention to her, and then later on, a couple scenes later, he becomes infected and he becomes one of them. He becomes one of the body snatchers, and she's having difficulty grasping with the fact that he has become a body snatcher, but maybe he's just a Warriors fan. Maybe he's just like this self-obsessed sports fan, and he's just not paying attention to her. But it's like her response to it is calibrated.
I don't know him anymore.
Right. It's not like she doesn't overreact, right. And she doesn't go,
something's odd with my husband.
Yeah, there's just something odd. And he just keeps, he keeps disappearing, and this car shows up at our house, and he gets in the car and he goes away, and it's so well done. The other thing is, speaking of it, we talked about this in the last podcast. Little visual tricks in the film that you can't quite explain how it's done. There's even at the beginning of the film
with the seed pods.
When the seed pods drop onto these giant leaves, and then these weird little hairy tendrils start growing out of the seed pods.
I'm pretty sure that's stop motion. I bet you that they built that up.
It can't be, because there's I looked and there's water droplets on. There's water droplets surrounding the seed pod on the leaf, and I'm like, if it was stop motion, those water droplets would have been moving. How is that done?
If we have a scientist out there who might be able to explain rapid growing tendrils,
rapid growing hairy space alien tendrils, yes. I want to know.
Mike Campbell has a
numbers 503. I want to know. Yeah, such a great film, and Leonard Nimoy is so wonderful. Well, Donald Sutherland is really the star of the film.
Oh yeah, and this is Donald Sutherland, having recently done Don't Look Back. Also, he was in MASH. He's Donald Sutherland at the peak of his career at this point. This is before Ordinary People, so he had this stretch from 70 to 80.
Although hot on the heels of Animal House.
Animal House. Yes.
Celebrating its 40th anniversary as well.
Gosh. Yes, I'm sure Eugene is kind of going nuts with that right now.
All right, let's move on from 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because I think this is a great film, and it's probably... I think 29 is spot on.
Yeah, I think you had actually, Invasion of the Body Snatchers didn't make either of our lists.
I know, but
that would mean it's just right outside our top 25.
Yeah, but I would put this right about where it is. I think 29 is perfecto.
Yeah.
All right. Next, what do we got next?
Paranormal Activity, 2007. So this might be another one of the where does the golden age start?
Yeah.
Paranormal Activity could prove to be
this started something.
This is because this is the film that built Blumhouse.
Yep, it is.
And from Blumhouse we get so many of at least even the philosophy of how to do a good serious horror movie for a small budget and make a lot of money.
Cheap, fast, easy, fun.
We're seeing
well done.
A lot of that in contemporary horror.
Not the Roger Corman model.
No.
but that's just cheap.
But they do have
cheap fast.
But like Corman, I think that the Blumhouse folks have taken it upon themselves to try and educate directors to say, we want to help you out. We want to let you do your own thing. You can go up to $5 million and we won't touch your film. You go above $5 million and then we're going to start getting...
You go above $5 million and we'll let you do an alternate version
of the director's cut.
A director's cut ending, which they do. I mean, this definitely has a great director's cut. In fact, if you go watch, that's the thing. I think we talked about this at one point when we were talking about
Our favorite haunted house movies.
No, not haunted house movies. We talked about this in the favorite found footage films.
Oh, that's true.
And
it might be both.
Well, maybe, yeah. But I think I think what's so great about this is that both endings are wonderful.
Yeah.
Both endings are really, really good. And I remember sitting down and watching them and I remember thinking, what a conundrum. Like watching these two endings and going, both of these work really well.
Yeah. I don't know that I've seen the alternate ending.
Oh, you got to watch, get the DVD, watch the alternate ending.
The one that I saw where Katie offs Mika and
watch. I'm not gonna spoil the alternate ending, but watch because both of them work super well.
Could you use the alternate ending with the continuing saga?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything like into
fundamentally
numbers 2, 3, 4, Lost Souls or whatever.
Yeah, and the Paranormal Activity is actually one of the franchise chains. I think actually maybe that's what I'm thinking of, because I think when we talked about horror franchises, this is one of the ones that I think that really holds up pretty well. I think
absolutely.
It goes 3 deep, maybe that before it starts falling off. The fourth one didn't do it for me. Amy, our shaky cam fan, I think this is very high on her list. But she's a big believer in the most current one also. So it is it's a gift that keeps on giving, and it's fortunate because both Katie Featherston and Mika Sloat, they don't do anything else. Right. Considering how wildly successful this movie was, I mean, it was done for under $1 million and has made hundreds of millions of dollars in response.
Maybe they just took their paycheck and they're living a comfortable life.
You hope they got a percentage.
Yeah.
You really do hope that they did, because it would suck if they just got a per diem and all of a sudden, the production company held all the money because they died. It's like if they're working still off and living in a 1-bedroom apartment in LA, that ain't fair.
Paranormal Activity hits all the right notes. It's a great ghost film. It's a great found footage film. It's a great sort of it's a great kind of like low budget art house. Well, not art house, but it's a great indie DIY kind of film. I mean, it really does hit a lot of the right notes.
Yeah, I think it like Blair Witch, its close cousin. It is successful in that it gives you a logical reason why you have the found footage. Right. That the stationary cameras, which was a money-saving trick from the director Oren Peli, that it never feels forced. Where so many found footage.
There's a couple scenes with the boyfriend who will not give up the camera, the camcorder. It's like, dude, just put the camcorder away. She's asking you to put the camcorder away. Just put it away. There's a couple of those scenes, but that actually does end up adding to the tension between the couple. Yeah. So, all right. And obviously, we both had this on the list. We both thought highly of it. I think 28 is
about right. I mean,
I had a little higher. You had a little higher. But yeah,
no complaints given what's coming up.
Yeah, we'll call it about right.
Okay.
Next,
27.
In the Mouth of Madness from 1994. Sam Neill.
Yeah.
John Carpenter.
Yeah.
Not my favorite John Carpenter movie, but boy, what a great film.
This is possibly the most Lovecraftian movie ever made.
Oh yeah.
And it is tied to authorship and the idea that that a horror movie novelist, or not a horror movie, a horror novelist can affect reality by opening a portal to hell, and issuing demons, and it's a very kind of where the intellectual exercise where Lovecraft loved to have these tomes that were filled with blasphemous spells and things that would touch, that communicate with elder gods and things that should not be, and all this. This is all that kind of stuff finally put to film. They don't put a 1-to-1 connection to it, but it's so heavily influenced by the works of Lovecraft, and it's about madness and the perceived realities that sort of warp on like there's the shattering mirrors and the things that all of a sudden the extra dimensional stuff, and then all these other people acting. It's like, am I crazy or is everybody else acting crazy?
Right.
So just
and this film also, I can't remember what film we talked about that was like full of scares aplenty, but this has scares aplenty.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's so many. Oh, The Omen. We were talking about The Omen in the last podcast, where there's just all these great iconic scenes in the film that are so scary that really stick with you. And this is just like chock full of those.
Yeah, and
the bicycle, the insane asylum,
the actual portal to hell. Although interestingly, I think sometimes like, I wanted to see Cthulhu come scrambling out of that hole. Sure. But I think that was.
Now, when was the last time you saw In the Mouth of Madness?
It's been a long time.
Yeah,
it's been like 10 years.
I would be interested to know if it is dated at all.
It quite possibly,
because it's been a moment since I've seen it. Probably 10, 15 years at least since I've seen it. I would be willing to bet 1994 might be a wee bit dated.
Yeah, but
some of the effects might be looking a little long in the tooth, because I did go back Hellraiser. I did go back and watch another John Carpenter film, They Live, which I love the film. I think They Live is a great film, but it's boy oh boy.
Yeah, well,
a little thin on the special effects budget.
If you watch Escape from New York, or if you watch Big Trouble in Little China, John Carpenter has a look.
Absolutely.
For the way that he films things. The one film
although this is somewhat far afield from the look, right? Yeah. Like this one doesn't quite fit the normal John Carpenter look.
It doesn't feature the John Carpenter sort of the sometimes the loopiness that he has, or maybe not loopiness, but things like his vampires,
right,
or Ghosts of Mars. It's not so campy.
Right.
This is a straight up serious horror take.
This has a definite serious quality to it. All right. Coming in next at number 26 is a film called Martyrs from 2008.
And guess what?
Pass. Okay, let's move on to number 25. Pass.
So 26.
This might be this. We didn't talk about Martyrs as it relates to
The Bridge Too Far.
The Bridge Too Far, the horror films that we just cannot stomach. But everything I have seen and read about Martyrs, boy, definitely fits that bill. I went through and watched, in preparation for this episode, a whole handful of. I read a bunch of reviews, and then I watched a bunch of online reviewers review this film, and I thought, not for me. Yeah. When they described the first part of the film as sort of revenge porn and the second half of the film as torture porn, I was like, that's a hard pass.
And yet, but you did see I Spit on Your Grave recently.
I did see I Spit on Your Grave, and that's a great film.
And that takes a high stomach. But I think that
I will say the difference between, as I understand it, without having seen the film, the difference between I Spit on Your Grave and Martyrs is that Martyrs does have this sort of like supernatural quality about it, in that there is some sort of strange
sacrificial
anorexic person who's following the one girl that's sort of like a specter spirit kind of thing. That's about as far as I know. That's about as much as I know. When they talk about this film in the most common the most common refrain about this film was like French extremist cinema, and I was like, that's all I need.
So this goes.
I don't need to know much more.
High French, Tension was one of these
French extremist cinema.
Sometimes you think that the Italians did nasty. The French have pushed the boundaries.
Oh my Lord!
Far as, it's like I know that Takashi Miike gets credited with really pushing the envelope. The French, man. So this is a number one film for two of our jurists. This is Liz Williams, our our book reviewer.
Right.
This is her favorite horror movie
of all time.
So Liz, I'm a little worried about you, honey.
Right.
This is pretty grisly stuff. And Luca Pincelli of Horror World and Review. Mm-hmm. And I always have to check Horror World and Reviews. I got it right this time.
Horror World and Reviews.
So this takes a certain fortitude of...
you haven't seen this.
I was going to try and cram this in last minute, and then I squeezed in Let the Right One In, which I loved.
Yeah.
I was going to attempt Martyrs, and then I kind of chickened out. But I think for the benefit of our reviewers, our judges who thought very, very highly of this, I'm going to try and give it a shot. No guarantee that I'm going to make it to the end of it.
We'll get back to you on this one. I did watch, when we talked about, and to me this seems like it's like cut from the same jib as Human Centipede. And I did, in fairness, watch Human Centipede when we talked about the greatest bridge too far type moments in horror, and
the concept of Human Centipede is just.
I think Human Centipede did make the top 326. Yeah. Made a couple people's lists.
There were a couple of votes for Human Centipede.
There was a couple, but it does seem like it is extreme. Yeah. It is extremely grody, extremely gory, and. I was struck, and we talked a little bit about, we've already talked about Halloween, and we might be talking about Halloween again, because I just saw Halloween last night on the big screen. And you know what's insane about Halloween? How little blood is in that film.
Right.
How very, very, very little blood is in that film.
There's a lot of menace.
There's a lot of menace, which is terrifying. There is almost no blood in that entire film. There's a blood, at the beginning of Halloween, when he kills the sister, there's blood on her, there's blood on the knife. Pretty much, you don't see much blood throughout the rest of the film, which is shocking.
Yeah.
If you think about it. Like that this has become one of, we may be talking about it again. It has become one of the,
It's a top of the totem pole movie.
It is. No blood.
Yeah.
Whereas Martyrs, like the trailer is just blood a go-go.
It just seems like, and the concept of, the
less
torture.
Is more.
Yeah.
Less is more is the concept we're going
but
for. But
I do have to, because I practiced this, because these names, the actresses' names.
Yes.
Malene Jampanoy is the name of Lucy, and Mariana Alawi. And these are our two actresses in there.
Is there like a Google horror actress translator?
I was
horror actress pronunciator?
I was fearing that I was going to have to say their names, and so I actually put it to Google and tried to figure it out, and it would redirect me to a YouTube video where they get introduced. So I practiced. There you go.
All right, good job.
Thank you.
Good job. All right, are we done talking about Martyrs?
Yeah, sadly, I can't speak about Martyrs that much because I haven't seen it, and I'm a little rattled by the prospect of seeing it.
Let's stop talking about it.
All right.
We're done. We're done with Martyrs. We might be coming back to Martyrs. All right, number 25 on the list is a film from this year. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening to this podcast 2 years from now, this year is 2018.
Right.
And we were, of course, talking about Hereditary.
Yeah.
Boy, what a film.
Yeah. This is
such a great film.
And this is a powerhouse. And, And yep. I saw this in New Orleans at the Overlook Film Festival. I think
Indeed.
and then
you shamed me, you chastised me, you berated me.
You gotta see this movie. It is it's the script on it is fantastic. The shots, the everything about this is a first time director given the keys to the kingdom and delivering spectacularly. This it came out of the Sundance Film Festival like a house of fire. There was one of the movie reviewers said, I think it was from Variety, said that it was pee in your pants scary.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely.
And I think and it does it without jump scares or without traditional jump scares.
There's a couple jump scares.
There's a couple just devastating, shocking moments.
Sure,
but it isn't the look to the left, look to the right, look to the well. Actually, maybe there was.
There was a couple jump scares,
but
it does it without blood. I mean, there is not a lot of gore. I mean, you see the little girl's head.
Well, at the end, what the Annie's fate is kind of grisly.
Yeah.
Think Garrett,
right.
Little clay knife or clay blade, but by and large,
not a ton.
It really, I think, the fear in this movie comes from again, like we talked about the witch in our previous episode,
heavy hitter,
family dysfunctional family,
right,
and the mistrust of. Because of the weird things in the past that have plagued this family.
Although this is dysfunctional family as brought to you by the mom, whereas the witch was dysfunctional family brought to you by the dad.
Right. And I would be stunned if Toni Collette does not get a Best Actress nomination because she gives you the full roller coaster of emotions in this thing. And to the extremes of emotion, from grief to manic excitement and giddiness, to morose depression.
Well, even the father, whose name
Gabriel Byrne.
Gabriel Byrne, yeah. I mean,
Steve.
Yeah, his performance is great.
He tries to play the connecting tissue, and he's failing.
right. I mean, he's great. Well, and even the son is wonderful.
And the creep Millie Shapiro, who's the creepy little girl, who apparently had to tell audiences to stop doing the noise because. That every time that when that gets used in the movie, something dramatic is happening, and people were horsing around, clucking in opportune times when it wasn't supposed to happen.
Right.
I think I would be remiss to mention that this is, though I think it has been lauded by many critics and a lot of horror movie fans. It also is a divisive movie. Like, I think this is on my top 25. It is Tom Carter's number 2 movie. It made a number of lists.
A little high,
here.
Tom. A little high.
But I think so. It was on 5 ballots, and yet if you asked Amy about it, she goes, "This is shit."
Right.
And it's like oh, it's so convoluted.
There was a number of other people that I had talked to that did not like the film. So, I would put it. I would not put it in the 90s.
We've packed the 90s full.
90s are packed. I put it about 60. Yeah, right on 60.
I think that may be fair.
For now, just because it's 2018. I think it needs to. I think it needs a little bit of time to breathe.
Right.
A little bit of time to unwind, and then maybe a couple of years from now, then we'll go back and look at Hereditary and go.
I mean, I'll admit that I was sort of riding the high of getting a chance to see a very early screening of this movie in a packed house of people who were diehard horror movie fans going to a festival, and that leaves an impression. But it was the kind of a thing where you felt like you had the wind taken out of you so many times. And then upon repeat viewing, it is a fantastic movie to see on repeat viewings because you will see things that you did not see the first time, and you'll go, aha,
right.
Now I'm putting these. You stitch the puzzle together, and you go, "Oh my God, that's what's going on!" And
it's a big puzzle.
It's dense.
It is a big puzzle.
So I suspect
our ace researcher made it through about 10 seconds of the trailer, and then he had to drop off. He was like, "Nope, I'm out. Done.
The trailer
Can't do it."
Yeah, poor Ernie.
Yes. All right, let's move on to number 24 on our list. This, of course, is the 2002 film I know you are super fond of, 28 Days Later.
This is
one of the best zombie movies of all time.
Yeah, and although, it's zombies in quotes, right?
Sure.
This is a,
it's
a zombie pandemic.
Are you fast zombie or are you slow zombie?
Yeah, this is the fastest of the fast. And
yes.
I think that this is also, it gives you one of the most sympathetic groupings of protagonists that you can put in a horror film. I think that you know, all the main players, they bond as a family. You really root for them to get through this situation, and you see them go through their ordeals. And you know, this movie was a huge influence on The Walking Dead. Certainly,
absolutely.
I don't know. I think they were done contemporaneously. But man, the opening sequence in the hospital where Cillian Murphy wakes up in the bed is the same thing as Rick waking up in a hospital.
Oh, I think this predated The Walking Dead, didn't it?
I think that this is what are we?
Oh God, 2002. I guess it was pretty close. Yeah, it was pretty close.
At any rate, this is. I think I put
and it's a zombie film with hope too. Because like unlike George Romero's Zombie, where it's very bleak and dark and there is no hope and there is no end in sight, this has multiple points where there is an end in sight, right? There is still a military outpost that you can go to, but there is still maybe the chance that society is going to turn itself around.
This one is also,
and of course, the end of the film. You kind of get that.
They filmed multiple endings, and they tested the audience, and they had a couple of them where, Jim, Cillian Murphy's character, is dying on a bed. And and they leave him behind. And then they go, well, we're just gonna have to find a way, and it's sort of more ambiguous.
I think there's like 3 or 4 on the DVD that you can watch, 3 or 4 endings, because I do recall going through all of them. There's a couple of them that are very, very similar in nature,
right?
But most of them do, I think, have more of a happy ending,
right? And then 28 Weeks Later, which came out a little later, a decent follow-up, but not great.
Yeah,
I think it's watchable.
Yeah. It's totally watchable. I think it's a good film. I don't think it's a great film.
No.
I think they were really confused about where they wanted to go with the whole thing, and they don't tie them together at all.
Yeah, and I think one of the key elements here is, unlike, say, your classic zombie movie, your Romero-esque zombie movie, where there's something supernatural about why the zombies are back. This is a plague.
Right.
And so the fact that it hit Britain, and that you can quarantine Britain or try and quarantine these things to prevent it from spreading. They're not crawling out of the graves, but still. The soccer player turned into zombies. That's what they apparently hired a bunch of soccer players to run around and chase folks to make them as fast as possible.
This is probably closer to a film that we talked about several podcasts ago, the number 74 film, 73, 74 film, Train to Busan. Is what I like. This is definitely like, if you like fast zombies as opposed to the shambling George Romero zombies, go see 28 Days Later, because 28 Days Later definitely has that fast zombie quality.
It is intense, and it took a lot to bump Dawn of the Dead from my top zombie movie list, and I love 28 Days Later.
I think it's a great film, and I really in particular like, and you just talked a little bit about it, but the opening scene where he's wandering through downtown London, which I don't know all the particulars about how they filmed that and when they filmed it and how they got all the permits and everything.
I think they waited until because of I think, are they above the 45th parallel in London? They waited until summertime at like 4:30 in the morning, or just at the break of dawn,
right,
where the streets were fairly clear in that part of London. And they filmed as much of it as.
But even that, I mean, they do some massive like crane shots and some helicopter shots and everything else, and I'm just like, there is not a freaking person.
Right.
So,
and they didn't have a big CGI budget. It's not like World War Z where it was all CGI. This was that's the great thing about this also, is that this is it's expert camera work and stunt work. There's not a bunch of CGI zombie action going on here, which is, I think, an unfortunate thing that's happened with the current age of fast zombies.
Yeah, Danny Boyle turned in one heck of a film.
Yep.
Yeah, one heck of a film.
Love it.
Not my favorite zombie film, but
we'll get to it.
Boy,
we'll get to your favorite.
Yes, it's a great film. It's a great film. Speaking of great films,
this is my number 3 film.
Number 3?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's super high.
Yeah. Well, this if you recall back to when our very first episode,
we have talked a lot about The Fly. Yes,
this is 1988,
1986.
86. Sorry,
86. The Fly. Yes, The Fly.
I should know the movie release dates for my favorite movies.
We have talked a lot about The Fly. We've talked about it in a number of different occasions. We've talked about greatest films of all time. I think we've talked about the scariest scenes of all time. Right. We're not talking about the 1950s Fly. We're talking about the Gina Davis, Jeff Goldblum Fly.
And it is the ultimate...
I'm realizing there's a lot of Portlandia characters in... We've talked about Jeff Goldblum. We've talked about Kyle MacLachlan.
Well...
Fred Armisen is coming in.
Carrie
no.
Brownstein, no. So, this is the ultimate body horror movie from the master of body horror. This is David Cronenberg at his best.
No, it's not. The Brood is David Cronenberg at his best.
Sorry,
The Brood did not make the list.
Brood did not make the list.
That's David Cronenberg at his best.
The Brood is great and is very rough. And actually, so is The Fly. I mean,
The Fly is really rough.
This is some of the most.
I would say this is David Cronenberg's most commercial outing, which isn't a bad thing.
And it's the most successful outing.
And most successful outing. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think this is like. Like he was trying to package up a sort of commercial thing, but then
I think Hollywood tends to run away from David Cronenberg because of body horror.
Oh my God!
Because it's like stuff is too weird. And this one, I think, because of Jeff Goldblum's performance and Chris Walas's fantastic prosthetics. Again, this is hail the age of practical effects.
Yeah.
You got goopy, gloppy, fall apart Jeff Goldblum and, monkey turned inside out and guy breaking his arm in an arm wrestling match. I mean, yes. But the key thing is watching a man trying to come to grips with the fact that he is changing from human to something less than human.
Right.
And and the scientist in him trying to understand it and trying to hold on to his humanity and failing.
And it all starts with Gina Davis rubbing him on his back and going,
what's got these funny hairs?
You've got these weird little kind of pokey hairs.
Yeah, and that was, the fact that Jeff Goldblum actually, for being the nerdy wonky guy, was pretty ripped for this movie when he was doing his gymnastics stuff, and you could see
he was amazingly ripped.
And so
although it's funny, and we just talked about Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which of course has Jeff Goldblum, and there's a scene where Jeff Goldblum goes into it's like a spa mud bath kind of thing, and he takes his shirt off, and I'm like, man, Jeff Goldblum is ripped.
Was he?
And that was 10 years earlier, 8 years earlier, and now in 1986,
right.
Jeff Goldblum is ripped.
Yeah. So good on you, Jeff. Looking hot.
Yes.
All right. It's scary and sad, and I think it's a beautiful tale, and I think you'll be hard pressed to come up with a better body horror story. I don't think, and this is one was like, I don't think anybody should try and redo this. I think that the first Fly with Vincent Price, awesome.
Yep.
This one, better.
Oh, for sure.
And then I don't know how you would improve on this.
Yep.
Someone might try.
Maybe
they did a sequel to it. It kind of sucked.
Maybe Kevin Bacon. Maybe.
No. Little Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie's The Fly. It's like I wouldn't.
That I would pay money for.
Oh.
I would pay money for Rob Zombie's The Fly.
So now we're gonna lead into.
I would not pay money for that.
One of Mike's favorites. Coming up next. This actually it's interesting. So 30 to 21. This is a lot of Mike and Eric's top films showing up in this batch.
Right. Well, because we
rated
them so high. Well, a lot of people. This number 22 coming in from 1990 is The Exorcist Part 3.
Yeah.
And we've talked plenty about The Exorcist Part 3. There is so much to be said about it. It is a great film. This of course was originally the William Peter Blatty script. I think it was called Legion, and I think they originally wanted to title it Legion, but there was some some wrangling back and forth with William Friedkin, and they eventually had to retitle it Exorcist Part 3. This, of course, is still set in Washington, D.C., as are the first Exorcist, and the latter half of the second Exorcist is set in Washington, D.C.
Which the second one I have not seen.
And this one, of course, features famed Georgetown basketball coach
George C. Scott.
George Thompson, George Thompson, and
John Thompson.
John Thompson and Patrick Ewing they're both in the film. There's a great sort of dreamlike sequence where George C. Scott goes to heaven and he encounters Patrick Ewing as an angel, and then has a consult with John Thompson, famed Georgetown basketball coach. So many wonderful pieces and parts about this, up to and including, the priest from the original Exorcist, as well as George C. Scott. There's some great dialogue.
Jason Miller. He was Father Karras in the first movie, who jumped out the window to destroy Pazuzu. In the first one, and now he is Patient X. But I think that it is remarkable. And this is something that I found out through Mike, and then tangentially, there was a fun podcast that was done where the discussion was what needs to go. It's the Canon podcast, where they debated which one deserves to be canonized, The Exorcist or The Exorcist 3, which a lot of people thought, ironically enough, sacrilege. It's like, how could you go against the first? And one of the arguments is that The Exorcist 3 is scarier. It's gotten more, and there are as vile and as rough as watching Reagan and her exorcism. There are elements in Exorcist 3 that match or exceed the scares from Exorcist 1. So if you're looking for a good scary movie, honest to goodness scary movie, Exorcist 3 right up there with the top of the ladder.
And and I think we've talked about this before, but the original Exorcist is just sort of dread and doom and gloom and just constant, it's exhausting. When you watch the first Exorcist, it is absolutely like watching poor Reagan go through the exorcism is absolutely exhausting. The scares in the Exorcist 3 are so much bigger and so much bolder and so much darker.
And I think part of it, I think Blatty didn't want to actually have an exorcism in this.
Right. And do.
The studio forced it upon him.
Yeah. And that's probably the biggest failing of the film is the end of the film, where they go into the psych ward, to the deep dark bowels of the psych ward, and they encounter the killer and have the exorcism in the psych ward cell. I mean, that's probably the biggest failing of the film. Which is the funny enough, it's the exorcism.
I think in this day and age, I think if there was this idea of sort of universe building, say like the Conjuring universe, or the Marvel universe and these kind of things, but if they were trying to do an exorcism universe, they probably could have done this story set sort of adjacent to it, but not having to do the exorcism itself. And they could have said there are pieces and parts that they can lay hints to it, but we don't need to have an actual exorcism itself. But
can you imagine if The Exorcist came out in, say, 2004? Oh dear God! There would have been like 6 Exorcist films by now.
There would have been so many. On The Exorcist.
So. Even if William Friedkin was involved, I think William Friedkin would have totally gotten rolled by Hollywood.
I think that was the beauty of the 70s and the freedom of which the directors had to explore. And I think I'm going to go back and say that the rating
explore
system,
or to not explore, like to not bow or kowtow to the financial pressures of what the studio wanted.
The studio thinks.
To be like, no, I'm not going to do an Exorcist 3. That's stupid.
Well, and one of the things that I'm most optimistic about our current the Hollywood environment is that if you don't make the movie super expensive, they're going to let you take a lot of chances.
Right.
And
right.
we're seeing a lot of horror movie subgenres that are moving to the fore that we hadn't seen, like in the dark days of the 90s, where all you were getting was rehashes and sequels, with maybe In the Mouth of Madness being one of the exceptions, and Scream, which actually was a meta take on the fact that they'd run out of ideas.
Right.
Right. The fact is now that if you have a good script and good ideas, you can connect some of these things. As dumb as The Nun was, I'm okay with them trying to do a horror universe
absolutely.
as long as it's organic.
I applaud the fact that they went down that path with The Nun.
Yeah,
I think that was
That's probably the best thing about The Nun.
Yes, that was an important part of the Conjuring universe was Valak. I mean, Valak was such a critical piece of all of the Conjuring films, and I'm glad that they explored that a little bit further. They didn't do a good job of exploring it, but I'm glad that they did. Yeah. All right. So the last film of the night, on our list,
is a remake.
Speaking of remakes and speaking of things connected together, this is the 2002 film The Ring,
directed by Gore Verbinski of Pirates of the Caribbean fame. He should have stuck to horror movies.
That's right.
Well, although he's incredibly wealthy now because of Pirates of the Caribbean.
Sure.
This, I think, proof that an American adaptation can be pretty awesome.
Oh, absolutely.
That I know that there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions to don't westernize.
An American adaptation featuring an Australian actress.
Yes, Naomi Watt.
Yes,
who was brilliant in this.
She was great. As was the other leading character, the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. Right. And the horse who could roll its eyes funny.
Yeah. I mean, that, honestly, that to me is the thing that really stands out in this film, is that it has a very grunge-like quality, right?
Very Seattle.
It's very Seattle. It's very dark. It's very rainy. Everything is doom. Everything is gloom.
Gray and green.
Gray and mossy and green and dark and wet.
Yeah. And girls crawling out of wells, crawling out of televisions.
And what a great set.
Yeah. But it also held fairly close to the bone to the original Ringu, right?
Absolutely. It really did.
It was faithful to it. I think you can take your pick. So this is sort of like Rec Quarantine, right? Where both good movies. You could flip flop them. Different people have different tastes on which one they like better. I think certainly The Ring got a much broader U.S. Release than Ringu did.
And so I think way broader, because I remember when The Ring came out, and somebody was commenting to me, because I had, of course, threw all sorts of superlatives towards The Ring and saying how great it was, and they said, "Oh, no, you need to see Ringu." And I was like, "Well, where do I see Ringu?" And it was like, "Well, good luck finding a copy of Ringu." Yeah. Like, even our local, video store par excellence didn't have even a gray market copy of Ringu.
So we're spoiled now because we can get it on streaming.
I mean, it took a little bit of work to find a copy of Ringu, and I eventually did find a copy of Ringu and watched it. And it too is a great film, but that was work.
Yeah,
that was work finding a copy of Ringu. No, the ring is a great, really great.
This was on your list, yeah?
Oh yeah, for sure. I put it pretty high up on my list. I really like.
Yeah, this was number 10 on your list.
I really like sort of the. I found really interesting the sort of like the psychedelic, kind of like video interludes. Very, very interesting and very disturbing. I mean, I know we've talked about this in the past, of the whole idea of like. How big a role the non sequitur plays in a horror film, where you're watching a film and you're expecting to see certain things, and then something comes out of the corner of your eye and it's in your periphery, and your brain can't process it.
My brain couldn't process when, and I forget the name of the apparition and what her name is.
Oh, yeah.
When she climbs out of the well and starts marching and then crawls out of the television, mind blown.
Right.
I just like, holy shit. So, I think that was I think it was a bit of a standalone though, early 2000s, because I think the Japanese wave was still moving through.
It was still happening. Yeah.
There still weren't a ton of great horror movies in the early 2000s, and again, I think we look back at movies like It Follows, and I think Paranormal Activity may have been sort of a nudge.
Sure,
but
5 years later,
we'll get to the to what actually established where we currently are and why films are the way we are now, but. Love The Ring.
Yeah.
This is trying to see who else, because now we're at the point where
everybody's voting for it. Everybody's on. Everybody's on the Ring train.
There were 9 votes for The Ring.
9 out of 30. That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about Ringu. We're talking about The Ring.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot. That's a lot of votes for The Ring.
Yeah.
Well, and well deserved. Well deserved. The Ring's a good film.
So here we go. So
all right,
all we have
numbers 30 to 21. Let's recap real fast.
Oh yeah, we didn't do our recap the last time.
All right, number 30, It Follows. Number 29, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Number 28,
Paranormal Activity.
Number 27,
In the Mouth of Madness.
Number 26, Pass, Martyrs. Number 25,
Hereditary.
Boy, what a film. Number 24,
one of my favorites, 28 Days Later.
Number 23, also one of your favorites.
The Fly, 1988.
Number 22, The Exorcist, and finally coming in hot.
Exorcist 3.
Exorcist 3. Sorry, yes, there was a 3 next to that, and then coming in hot at number 21 is The Ring.
So there you go, folks. We're next up, the top 20.
Woof.
So again, thank you to all of our jury for submitting such wonderful movies for us to digest, and we're hoping that you guys are getting as much of a kick out of it as we are actually telling it to you. So,
and now that we are deep in the Halloween season, like every single grocery store you go to are packed to the gills with Halloween crap and pumpkins and everything else.
Oh, my diabetes!
This and the diabetes. This should be your definitive go-to list for prepping for Halloween.
That's right.
The Scariest Things podcast top 100 list.
So we have if you're curious, if you want to see all of the top 100 currently put out in written form, go to scariestthings.com, 1T.
Yep.
And it's at the top of the page under the big list.
Yep. And if you want to see every last person's list, you can also deep dive into all of the jurors and all 326 films to get you ready for Halloween.
Binge up, everybody. Thanks a lot.